Good evening, ladies, and welcome to tonight's fantastic class about living your best life. It is my pleasure to introduce our host for this evening, Nancy Anderson. Nancy, please take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate your being here, and I hope this will be just useful information for you. This is actually the first session of 3 that we're going to do. The next 2 sessions will be more like a workshop, and you probably saw on the invite a couple of worksheets, which I will refer to later, that you'll be able to use, hopefully, after this for the next 2 sessions, and we'll have a lot more discussion at that time. But I just want to welcome all of you and also welcome your questions as we go along. I will stop through this to just see if you have any questions or need clarification on anything I'm talking about. So it seemed to be a time when, coming out of COVID, most of us have just not had a lot of balance in our lives. Things have just changed so much over the last year for most people. And so it seemed like a good time to try to share some of these tips with you and just to take a look at our own lives and where we're kind of out of balance. Just to give you an idea, I'm going to talk a lot about transitions. We've all been through many transitions in the last year, and we're going to talk about how you can balance your life again through those transitions and through future transitions as well. Just to share with you a little bit about my life experience and the transitions that I've been through, so that you know that I can relate to many of you just through my own experience and probably what you're going through in terms of finding work or going back to work or doing resumes or whatever. I started out learning about a balanced life actually from my mom, who just emphasized to us as kids. I have 2 sisters, and when we were younger, her perspective was always to lead a balanced life, and she focused on our mental well-being, our physical, our religious, and our social well-being. She had a 4-point program going with her daughters, and that's what she emphasized. She never expected us to excel in anything, but she felt that we just needed to be balanced. And so we all went to camps and things like that that also stressed balanced living. And then when I went to college, I became an occupational therapist. I got my degree in occupational therapy, which we were working with not only medically or physically handicapped folks or people needing physical therapy or occupational therapy in the physical realm, but also in behavioral health. And so our focus there again was on balanced living for work, play, and self-care. That's where I learned more balance. And then in my professional careers, I worked in behavioral health and also in substance abuse for a number of years. I worked as a manager, and I also was then a trainer for a lot of years. And it seemed that throughout that whole time, in addition to what I was managing in terms of the actual work I was doing, a lot of it was about relationships and a lot of discussion about how people could live a more balanced life. So had a lot of just life experience in this area. I got my life coaching certification a number of years ago. And so I established my own life coaching practice called Let My Light Shine. So that's where Let Your Light Shine comes from on the bottom of the slides here. My passion really is to support people to be all that they've been created to be. And that is by through encouragement and through showing people how to live a balanced life in order to achieve their purpose for being on this planet. So this is more than just about balancing your life now. It's about achieving your purpose as well. Okay. First of all, what do we mean by life balance? a medical dictionary will define life balance as a harmonious blend of occupational, familial, social, and leisure pursuits. That's kind of a little more complicated way of looking at it. We look at happiness and life balance, actually, and we're talking about what those are affected by. Part of those things are affected by age and our stage in life. Our balance changes with both age and whatever stage we're in. It's affected also by our personality, and that comes from our genetic type and also our upbringing. And we all have had different experiences as we grow up. So that affects how we see our life balance. Also, our life experiences do that for us as well. So because there are so many differences in all of us, life balance is therefore changing, and it's also different from each one of us. So I'm going to give you some basics, but then we're going to look at how you adjust those according to your own lifestyle. There's no single model that's right for everybody, and no single approach is right for your whole life. So it's changing all the time, and important to keep looking at that. Like most other things, however, life balance and happiness can be managed and attained. If we know the components, including our true self, we're going to talk about that a little bit, and what gives us our own well-being. Life balance can therefore be understood, and it can be planned and achieved just like any other important aim. As we look at a couple of models, I want you to be thinking about what a balanced life would look like for you. And I'm just going to ask a question at this point, and if you choose to answer, you can go ahead and unmute. But how many of you feel out of balance at this point in terms of your days, your life? Anybody feel sort of out of balance or overwhelmed or stressed at this point?
Yes.
Yes. That was a yes. Okay. Yeah, and we're going to look at some of those ways that change and our transitions in the last year have contributed to that lack of balance. Okay. Okay, this is one model. It's kind of complicated a little bit. So I don't really use this model in teaching. I just show it to you as a visual for you to be able to see a little bit about what we're talking. And you'll see that this is a wheel, a life balance wheel. And there are a lot of different sections in here that we're going to simplify. My model simplifies this, but this is just a little more complex model of the things that go into making our life balance. The model that I created for teaching purposes and for myself is Let My Light Shine. And if you are any studier of the stars, you may notice that this is the Big Dipper. If you've had any study of the sky, and I'm talking about astronomy, not astrology, you can maybe recognize some of the constellations. I've never officially taken an astronomy course, but again, my mom used to point out these different formations of stars in which we call constellations that were most prominent in the sky. There were some that she called Cassiopeia, that was one, Orion the Hunter was one, and of course the Big and Little Dippers were other ones. And so when it came to creating a model, that seemed to be something that I could relate to in terms of setting up a model for life balance. My dad was also a pilot, and like sea captains or pilots, airline pilots, he was familiar with navigation by the stars, particularly the star that's called Polaris, which appears to remain fixed in the sky in the northern hemisphere. So that's this big star. Can you see my pointer here? Can you all see the pointer? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I can't tell from this end if you can see it. That's why I needed to ask. So the North Star in the sky always looks like it's remaining in the position of north in the northern hemisphere. It stays in a fixed position. And then this,
Nancy, your line has been muted. There you go.
okay, and the name for this constellation here, the Big Dipper, okay, rotates around the North Star. It starts with these two pointer stars that point to the North Star, and then this whole constellation wraps around the North Star. This becomes fixed. Okay. This, another name for this star is Polaris, if you've ever looked at that. Another name for the constellation itself is Ursa Major, which is the Great Bear. So we in Colorado know about bears, so that might be something you relate to, but it's easier to show you the Big Dipper. Can you all see this Big Dipper, how this works? Have you noticed this in the sky ever? If you look to the north, the brightest star really in the north, towards Wyoming, for those of you who are directionally challenged, towards Wyoming, if you look straight up, that's where you should see the North Star, and that's where the Big Dipper starts. So on a clear night, you should be able to see this whole constellation. These two first stars, again, are the pointers. Okay, so they are basically the lead stars for this constellation. My life balance model is built around these 7 stars. Okay, the North Star in my model represents your true north, or my true north, or sometimes called your true self, or also called your purpose. What's your purpose for living on this planet? It may be to take care of your family. It may be to launch some kind of an idea for humanity. It might be something like going to school and getting your degree. Whatever your purpose is, that's what your true north is, what I refer to as your true north. And that your life balance then revolves around what that purpose is, what that true self is. Does that make sense to everybody? Can I get any feedback here? Okay. Each of our Big Dippers are going to be different. Okay. And when we do this model in the workshops, yours will be different from mine. But I'm going to give you just some of the basic areas that are part of this life balance. Okay. Okay. So these are the components that I've chosen in my model for life balance. And the first one is self-care. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And I'm sure you've heard that before. And when we talk about self-care, we're talking about our physical self-care, our mental self-care, our emotional health, diet, exercise, rest, and anything else that you do to take care of yourself. Okay, that's one component of balance. My guess is that for many of us, this is a major area that has sort of gone off kilter during COVID, okay? Because most of us were pretty isolated. So maybe we didn't get the exercise we normally get. Maybe we were gaining weight or losing weight and not eating the appropriate diet. Perhaps we just weren't taking care of ourselves mentally because we were just so anxious because of being confined for so long. But those were things that got upset during COVID for people. The second area is relationships or relational, and that would include the balance in your personal life, your family, your friendships, and your types of communication. Has that been less or more? We were communicating, a lot of us, even now, by Zoom as opposed to being present with people. We had to use social media and texting and the telephone a lot more than being in touch with people. So that can also kind of go out of balance for us, especially during a pandemic. Our spiritual is another area for balance. Whether you call that your faith, your religion, whether it's your higher power, whether you believe in the universe as being your ultimate spiritual self, then that's also part of the balance as well. The next area would be your vocational or avocational. And I say that for a specific reason. I have those categorized together. Most of you, I'm guessing, are either working or intending to work or have retired from work at this point. So we're talking about occupation and work when we're talking about vocational, career. When we're talking about avocational, we're talking about volunteering. And for some of us who have retired, we volunteer, we serve in other ways, but it's still considered part of that balance, substituting for maybe the work that we did for a long time. I don't know about some of you, but I worked most of probably 40, 45 years before I retired. And that was a huge change for me. And I had to find other ways to balance my life with other types of activity besides work. Our intellectual well-being is also part of our balance, and that might be further training. It might be going back to school. It might be finishing a degree or starting a degree. It could be ongoing learning through podcasts or through reading or whatever stimulates your brain and your thinking intellectually. Financial is another star in the Big Dipper. This would include your money management and your financial plan. What do you have planned for the future to keep you in balance so that that doesn't, and that again was something during COVID that we all know kind of threw people off, whether people lost a job or were on unemployment or even had their own businesses and could not, count on the kind of business that they'd had in the past before COVID. So I keep referring to COVID because that's the most familiar thing right now, I think, for all of us in terms of the stress that it's caused and the lack of balance that most of us have felt during the past year. Finally, recreational is another important part of our life balance, and that includes things like your leisure activities, your hobbies, your play, whatever is fun, and by all means, whatever recreates your energy and your energy and your well-being. What questions do you folks have so far? Any questions? Unmute. Is this fairly clear?
No
Ladies,
question.
Hey, it's fairly basic actually, but I don't think it's something we think about very often, and it doesn't come to our minds until we're totally stressed. And then it's like something is out of whack here. So that's part of the reason I'm just going into detail about this. One of the things that I think is really great about Dress for Success is that Dress for Success offers a lot of assistance in almost all of these areas, whether it be through some of these Zoom meetings or whether it be through, volunteering, whether it be through work, resume writing or looking for work or dressing people for work. There are a lot of ways that Dress for Success is a wonderful resource and assistance in not only training, but resourcing people for the workplace and for maintaining life balance, and getting people back into that balance. Let's look at some common transitions that most of us have gone through at one time or another, or you might want to call them life challenges as well. I want you to be thinking, in addition to my list, of anything else that you can share with the group of other life challenges that have occurred for you, especially in the past year. Let's discuss some of the most common ones here. I've outlined COVID. You're hearing me talk about it, but that I think probably for most of us has been the most challenging transition in the past year. We're coming out of that and coming out of that, back out of that pandemic and back into the workplace, back into social activities. is also another challenge. Even coming back out of that, trying to return to some sense of normalcy. So that can cause its own change in balance for us. Marital status, like marriage or divorce, separation, even death of a spouse, can change can be a transition for us. Job change or loss of a job or even a new job. I don't know how many of you are currently working or looking for work, but any of those can create sort of a change in our overall life balance if we're not paying attention to those other areas. Illness, surgeries. You've gone in for some kind of, for me, I've had several joint replacements, and that has always changed the balance in my life, recreationally and in a lot of other ways as well. Chronic illness. Someone has a chronic illness, either in your family or you yourself, may inhibit that balance for you. Moving or relocation to a whole nother area. You might move within the same city, or you might relocate out of state, but that is one of the biggest stressors and life challenges for people. The whole thing that goes with relocating. Addictions. Some of us have had experience with different types of drug, alcohol, and other types of addictions that cause an upset in the balance, temporarily or maybe even for a long time. I worked on a substance abuse unit, or several substance abuse units for many years, and we used to talk a lot about life balance in the realms of stress management, leisure planning, financial planning and budgeting, exercise. All of those things get out of balance when anyone has any kind of an addiction. I don't care if it's to chocolate, anything that takes our mind off that balance for ourselves. Also, our responsibilities change. Our responsibilities last year changed, and many of you were teaching your kids that were at home, or you were responsible for parents who were ill, or your responsibilities changed in your home and in your work life. So change in responsibilities can also cause an upset for us in our balance. Death of a loved one, in addition to death of a spouse. It's been a parent or a child or a friend, anyone who's close to us, that can also upset the balance for us. I can relate to retirement because I retired about 3 years ago, and it was actually a layoff of about 100 people. And so it was sort of a forced retirement. I had planned to work for another year, but my life prior to that had been as an information systems trainer in hospitals and nursing centers for a company. And I had traveled 3 weeks out of 4. I was on an airplane somewhere, meeting people from all over the country, having friends all over the country, but not really having a life much here where I live in the Denver area. And so retirement just changed that whole balance for me. I had to figure out what to do at home. I had to find new friends. I had to find a social life that wasn't on an airplane. I had to figure out what my exercise program was going to be, not in some gym in a hotel somewhere. So it made a huge change, and it took me a couple of years to really feel like I could get my life sort of back into balance, some kind of balance. Some of you may have experienced retirement. My guess is most of you are younger than that and maybe haven't retired yet, but it is something that would change that balance for you. Incarceration. Some of you have had experienced that for yourselves or a family member or someone close to you. That can upset the balance in a family as well as a person's own life balance. Changes in finances are a big one, and I think many people have experienced that in the last year a lot. And whether it's due to a job change, a job loss, being on unemployment, that changes our finances. And along with the change in responsibilities comes usually some kind of change in finances. And another one is pregnancy as well as child rearing. If you have kids, you know that that can upset your own balance unless you're able to actually take time for yourself. And empty nest, your kids go away if you have children, and you are left either with yourself or with your spouse or significant other. And then what? It changes. Your life balance changes at that point. What other transitions or life challenges might some of you have experienced that aren't on this list in the last year, or even that are on this list? Anybody? Don't be shy. Okay, well, it's a pretty comprehensive list, and I'm guessing you've experienced at least one of these, if not more, within the last year. So looking at some of these, we often don't realize what is off kilter or missing until we're stressed out. And that then, everybody has a different picture of what their own life balance looks like. And we all experience stress differently. It creeps up on some of us, sometimes it's consistent with us, but changes in our lifestyle, changes in our life balance does cause stress. And so let's take a look at how we can maybe manage and have some assessment of what is off kilter in our lives. To do that, I want to show you some of these ways of assessing our own life balance. And I'd like you to take some time to think about these for our next session. And there is a worksheet that we'll be doing in the next session that kind of follows along with this. The first one is your own self-awareness. Sometimes we are just so busy taking care of everybody else that we aren't even aware of what's going on with ourselves. And if you don't have time to do that, I would just suggest that you take a half an hour even, or 15 minutes a day, and kind of start thinking about your own strengths. What do you have going for you? What areas do you need some help in that might be weaker areas for you? If that's seeking a job or staying in a job. What expectations do you have of yourself? And what expectations do you think other people have of you? Important to be aware of that, because sometimes our expectations are too high for ourselves. Sometimes we don't even realize our own strengths, and we expect maybe something less of ourselves. So take a look at that. Also, our time management. Again, when we're so busy, okay, so busy taking care of everything else, trying to just keep our lives in check and our families in check. Sometimes an example would be we don't have time to take care of ourselves. People who are pregnant talk about this a lot, or who've had a new baby talk about this a lot, mostly new baby. Got a new baby, those of you who have kids, you know what it's like. You don't sleep, you eat when you have a chance, you don't get out of the house unless somebody's helping you out, and you have to rest when the baby rests. It changes your life around and changes your time management. So that's kind of an extreme, but take a look at your time management. Where are you spending most of your time? Also, what's your environment like? Is it chaotic? Right now, I'm having my house remodeled, so my whole environment is upside down right now. But I'm trying to stay flexible and keep at it with taking care of myself and making sure that I don't get too stressed out by having everything a mess around me. It's a lesson in flexibility. If your environment is calm, good for you. You can manage everything else. But sometimes when we're in a chaotic environment, whether it's your house is a mess or whether just too much is going on around you, that can also influence whether your life is in balance or not, and whether you get stressed out because of it. Another area to assess is your vision and your intention. What makes you happy? Has that changed in the last year? What makes you happy? What dreams do you have? What goals do you have? And again, there's that word purpose. And I think a lot of times This has come into play a lot more in the last, probably in the last few years, where people are talking about a sense of purpose, contributing to the planet while we're here, and having some sense of why and what we're shooting for. Um, and I think it's important to take a look at that. A lot of times we get busy looking at everybody else, and we don't necessarily look at what it is we're shooting for, that true north that we're talking about. Another area is an area of focus. What are your values? What do you value in life? Do you value time for yourself? Do you value activities with your family? Do you value close relationships where you work, or is it strictly a job? What are your priorities? What comes first for you? And then what other considerations do you have to take a look at or to focus on in order to bring your life back into balance? Finally, take a look at plan. What kind of actions do you need to take? What barriers are there that you either have to adjust to or maybe eliminate those barriers somehow? What possibilities are there in the future if you start paying attention to your own life balance? Yes, it's so hard to keep your mind on personal goals at the same time. Right. Who said that? I agree with you. To keep your eye on your own personal goals. Someone wrote that in there. I'm guessing that someone wrote that in there. I didn't put that in there. That's good. It is hard to focus on our own goals. That's why I'm saying you have to take some time to do an assessment of your own life balance, your own life. And again, it's hard to take care of anybody else or to work or whatever else if you yourself are kind of out of balance. The plan, okay, so again, what actions do you need to take? What barriers are there? What's possible? And what solutions might you come up with to bring yourself back into some sense of balance? That will change. It always changes for all of us, sometimes more frequently than others. But to focus on that and to try to bring that back into balance, you've got to have some idea of what actions you need to take to do that. And I would suggest that as you look at these, you talk with other people. You talk with your family, or you talk with good friends who know you well, who can say, maybe if you tried this, that might help you feel better. That might bring your life back into balance. Talk to people at Dress for Success. They've got a lot of resources. And that kind of brainstorming with others, as well as doing some thinking on your own, so what I call self-brainstorming, will help establish your direction and the change that's needed.
What is the
Was that a question out there? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Was somebody asking a question, or was that just background?
I think that was some feedback.
Okay. What background or what questions or feedback do you have at this point? I guess I would have a question for you, and that is, does this seem unrealistic? Or does this seem useful to start to focus on your own self?
It's useful.
Come out of this.
For me, hi everyone, it's Elisha. For me, it looks useful, but it's like, depending on what's going on in your life, it can feel like unrealistic. So you could start and then something will happen in your life and then you get off track, and it's like, how do you stay on track even though there's so much going on?
Mm-hmm. There's so much going on. I agree with you. I think if you can just get a sort of a basic plan, knowing things are going to change and knowing that we all have to adjust all the time, it's never going to just be permanently one way. But if you are stressed out in any way because you haven't had a look at what's kind of out of balance, you've had to focus on one thing more than others, then you have at least the opportunity to be self-aware of that. It's like, okay, I know right now that this is where my focus has to be, but in order for me to take care of myself, I've got to bring this eventually back into balance. It's not going to be forever this way. Does that kind of make sense? Tackle one thing at a time. It doesn't have to be the whole picture.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Baby steps.
Yeah. So even just starting with that self-awareness piece, and this is what we're going to focus on actually in the next workshop, is to take, the hour or whatever we have together to just kind of take a look at these things. Give yourself a little bit of time to look at these things, your strengths, your weaknesses, maybe what makes you happy. Just start to take a look at those things, and so that it changes your focus a little bit, um, and can potentially change that balance around. I know life is not easy for anybody right now, for the most part, and for you ladies, I'm sure that it's very challenging. Much more challenging when you're in the world and you're raising kids, or you've got kids in college, or whatever, you're in school yourself. Much harder than someone like myself right now who is retired and finding different ways to look at things. But out of my experience, taking a look over, a number of years, the whole idea is to try to give you a few resources to step into before it gets too stressful for you. Okay, what is next? So here we are. We're identifying some of the transitions that have affected you the most in this past year. And we've talked about some of those. Our next session, I want you to use that Managing and Attaining Life Balance worksheet that was on the invite to this presentation. If you need that, and it came out kind of, I noticed when I opened it up, and it might have been just my computer, when I opened it up, the stars were kind of missing and the blanks were kind of all over the place on the one worksheet, and some of the blanks were off on the other one. I think it might have been my computer, but if you need a copy of that, I can send it to you. Just send me an email, and I will be glad to send those worksheets to you individually if you'd like that. Not on the website, but just send them to your email. But for the first session, and that's going to be, or the second session, that'll be July 14th, same time. And I would like you to take that worksheet and look at that ahead of time and take a look at where you're off balance right now, and use that worksheet to just kind of fill a few things out. You don't have to make a big deal out of it. It's not like a school assignment. This is for you to start assessing your own life balance. So we've got something for you personally to kind of work with. And then on July 21st, we'll have another workshop session. And on that one, I'm going to ask you to fill in the star blanks that are on that second worksheet, starting with your two top priorities on the pointers on the left. And I'm going to give you an example of what mine looks like, and yours will be different from mine. No expectation that it has to be like mine. But this is kind of an idea of where my priorities are and what you can do as well. Okay, so my true north, or my true self, or my purpose, I established a long time ago for myself out of my own life experiences. I have tended to be everybody's cheerleader for my entire life. Okay, I'm just one of those people that loves to encourage other people. And so my total purpose is to support and encourage other people to be all that they've been created to be, to fulfill their purpose. That's why I'm here with you today. Okay, this is one way I try to do that. Okay, that's my true north. That's what I keep in mind as my purpose, and how I try to keep my life in balance other ways, this way. Okay, so my first star here is my spiritual life. Okay, I try to keep that in balance for myself. I happen to be a Christian. Doesn't mean that that's what you have to be, or that I'm pushing that at all. That just happens to be where my first star is, and what I trust to point to my own purpose. The second one is my relationships. For me, my life is all about relationships. People that I'm close to, people that I'm not close to, people's stories. I love I love meeting people, and I love encouraging people to do, what their dreams are and to make those happen. So those are my two priorities. And my constellation, my Big Dipper here, revolves around this purpose. Okay, so if this was the Big Dipper in the sky, this would be my North Star, and this would be the start of where that dipper revolves. The Big Dipper itself revolves this way around the North Star. So these are the two, what I call the pointers. The next area that I have for myself is my self-care. If I can't take care of myself, I don't do too well with any other relationships. So exercise, diet, sleep, um, doing fun things for myself, self-care. I put vocational, avocational up here because it's important for me at this point in my life. I've had my vocational life for many years, and I told you, I'm retired. So now it's about service. It's about volunteering. And there's several organizations that I volunteer for, both at church and Just for Success and a few other places as well as life coaching. And then intellectually, I still need to read. I still need to study. I still need to learn from other people to keep myself balanced and to be able to support other people, to support this purpose here. So I listen to podcasts, or I go onto Instagram. My daughter is a health coach, and she puts points out there every single day, trying to encourage people to grow each day. So intellectually is one area here, followed by financially over here. Keeping stable financially, not dipping too often into retirement, being able to manage those finances as I go along. And then finally, I don't know if you can see this under everybody's picture, but this is recreation and leisure, finding ways to have a good time, to recreate my own energy. And that may come through, I just recently started taking an art class because I tend to be pretty structured when I do any kind of artwork. And so this is like breaking that structure and trying to break out of that. I'm taking a fun art class where we just throw paint basically, and it's very freeing. But realizing that I needed to have some outlet, getting back into life again, out of being isolated. So that just kind of gives you an idea of these 7 stars that I was talking about. And yours is going to look different from mine, I'm guessing. It may be that vocational is right here at the top of your dipper here. It may be relationships are somewhere else around here. And financials and vocational might be your 2 guiding points right here. Might be. There's no judgment in this. Everybody's is different. It's what works for you, and remembering that what we're looking at is what supports you to be your true self and to have your life balanced. Okay, what questions or comments do you have at this point? I know this did not take an hour and a half like we have scheduled, and usually if you end earlier, people are happier about that, but I'm totally open for any questions or comments. And let me know if this is useful for you, or if I can improve this in another way for you. Anybody?
Any ladies have any comments that they'd like to share?
I'm just excited for the next session and to do the worksheet. I know this is something I need to deal with. So thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Do you need the worksheet, or were you able to pull that off of the invite?
I was able to pull it off the invite,
Okay.
but that's why so many people are kind of quiet with this. I think it's a very sensitive topic, so we're processing.
Yeah, it is a sensitive topic. And I think, most of you, I'm guessing, are really busy right now. You're just busy managing life, particularly after this past year. I think it's been hard for people to kind of get back into the swing of things. Everybody I talk with, it's like been challenging. in some ways, whether it's getting back to your social activities or getting back to work or finding a job or anything. It has been very challenging and it's sensitive. You're right. It is a sensitive topic, but I'm just encouraging you, um, just as you're using Dress for Success now for whatever reason, whether it's job search, whether it's resume writing, whether it's business dress, whatever that is, I'm just encouraging you, take a look and take a little time for yourselves to assess this balance for you so that you don't get more off kilter in going back into whatever your life is about right now. Most of us have had some change even in relationships. Divorces are up. We know that violence is up. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in the world that just really is upsetting and upsets our own personal balance. So thank you for mentioning that it is a sensitive topic and it's going to be something that just requires a little thought for everyone. I have to reassess all the time. This whole presentation, I had to be reassessing myself the whole time I was doing this for you folks. So it's an ongoing process. Don't be scared by it.
Nancy, we have several ladies who are asking if the presentation can be made available to them via email. So
Sure.
if you want to send that presentation to myself, I will be happy to send that out as well as the worksheets to everyone who is present on tonight's call.
That's perfectly fine. I will be glad to send it to you. I think I can send it to you. I did it on Google Docs. So I think what I can do is share it with you somehow. I haven't used Google Slides before this. I've always used PowerPoint. So I'll figure out a way to send it to you so you can send it out.
Absolutely. I'll send you my Gmail address.
Yeah. And you all might want to just take a little, if you want my email address or my Gmail address, just take it down. It's right there in front of you, Nancy J. Anderson 9. Don't forget to put the 9 in there at gmail.com. And in the subject line, if you email me, just indicate something from the DFS presentation, and I'll recognize it then from you. If you have any other questions that you want to ask personally. Here's a question. Why do you think aggressive behavior has run rampant in public places like airplanes lately? I don't know. I used to travel all the time, and it was crazy before the pandemic, I think, to a degree, but I don't know. I have no idea. Does anybody else have any idea why we've got so much aggressive behavior going on? Maybe because we've been cooped up for so long? I really don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Maybe because the media is instilling so much fear into people that they're taking it out that way.
I think you're right. I think the media social media also plays a huge part in that. Yeah. I also think, we're seeing more mental illness show up in a lot of places, which shows up in the form of violence. I think that's been, shown a lot lately. And it might not be on airplanes, but it certainly has been in the public and in the public eye a lot lately. Hopefully we're addressing those issues a lot more than we have in the past and giving people help that way. But I think that also shows up in a lot of aggressive behavior right now. I worked in behavioral health for a number of years, and a lot of times under stress, that's what shows up.
We have some great comments about that. One comment says people are not resting enough and they're thinking too much.
That's right. That's right. Good point. Good point. What other thoughts do you have about that? I think the whole travel industry too right now is just, it changed so much during the pandemic that people are getting back on planes as an example and thinking that it's going to be like it used to be, and it isn't. It's not. Even during the pandemic, I flew a couple times during the pandemic, and you know, people wore their masks and there was social distancing, but now we're crammed back into airplanes close to one another again. And I think it just, that environment is leading to a lot of just people being more aggressive. It's unfortunate. I come from an airline background. My dad ran an airline, so I have a lot of sympathy for anybody who is working in that industry. It's been very difficult for them, and it's difficult now when passengers get out of line.
I
What other
agree, Nancy.
comments?
And I
Yeah.
think that part of our problem is we have so much repressed anger. We have
Yeah.
issues and things that happened to us a long time ago that we haven't dealt with, gotten proper therapy. We just kind of shoved it under a rug and we just shoved it inside. We bottled it in. And then during COVID, you were by yourself at some point in time and had to face all of that little nasty
Yes.
stuff that you haven't dealt with. And so oftentimes that comes out in explosions. It doesn't come out in a healthy way. It comes out just exploding over everywhere and causing a lot of distress.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that's totally right on. Yeah, we've all had a lot of time to ourselves and if time to ruminate about things and time for things to build up. And that's why those stressors, I go back to those stressors are what throw us out of balance. It throws us out of emotional balance, if nothing else. And then everything else kind of follows that. So it's, I think, important to take a look at that. Yeah. And if those issues are coming up for any of you, get some help. You know, there's help out there. Get some help with it. But I agree with you, Amara. I think that's totally one of the reasons why we're seeing so much of it. The whole idea of kids being home, you know, for so long, that has changed so many people's lives. I mean, if I had children that were in elementary school asking me how to do math problems, there's no way I could have helped them. I would have been totally frustrated with that, you know, because they don't do math the same way they did when I was a kid. And I'm sure some of you have experienced that too, just being home and having to be a teacher as well as a parent has not been easy for a lot of people. And that's just one example. Well, if you don't have any other thoughts, give Amara your email addresses, and I will be glad to send this to you, as well as the worksheets. If you need those, let me know, or Amara can send those back out to you. I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you, and I hope that you will feel free to email me if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to talk with anybody regarding this subject or life balance in general or life coaching. But thank you so much for being here. And I'll look forward to the next workshop, which again is on July 14th. You'll get an email about that. If it's okay with you, Amara, we're just going to go ahead and close early. Is that all right? Do you have anything you need to say to anybody?
No, that sounds good to me. If you want to stop your share really quick.
Okay. I will stop the share.